Thanks very much, Jeremy, for that introduction, and thank you also to Tanya for the invitation to speak. Bernard Zolom, a partner with KPMG based in Melbourne. My presentation today, Reimagining the Asian Middle Class. I have a very simple proposition, and that proposition is that China is firstly a rising superpower, that we have an inextricable relationship with that rising superpower, and that there are benefits as well as challenges that will flow from that over the next decade, over the next half a century. I want to start by taking a big picture perspective of where China sits in the global economy. This chart identifies the rising GDP of the United States, the most powerful country on the planet and in history, from 1900 on the left through to 2011 on the right. And the figures on the left show GDP effectively. The US is the biggest economy on the planet. It's around about 15 to 16,000 billion dollars in GDP in turnover every 12 months. Australia, by comparison, is about 1/10 of that number. I want to overlay that with the rise of the Chinese economy. And you can see the profound shift that has taken place over the last 4 or 5 years, to the point that China's economy is now, in US dollars, around about $7,500 billion, about 50% of the US economy. In the year 2000, China was 33% of the US economy. In 1990, it was barely 10% of the US economy. At no point during the Cold War did the USSR ever get to any better than 10% of the US economy, and we were scared witless of the impact of that rising superpower, if you like. China is already a superpower. It's already at 50% of the US economy. And largely as a consequence of that, it has driven a demand for, in fact, a relationship with Australia: food, energy, resources, commodities, and increasingly space, security, lifestyle. The other point I would make is that I think that this changes the geopolitical relationship between Australia and China and the US. We are the only nation on the planet with 23 million people to claim the resources of an entire continent. The only way you can hold the resources of an entire continent with 23 million people is if you have the imprimatur of the prevailing world superpower. Who will be the Brits in the 19th century, the Americans in the 20th century? Who will be the prevailing world superpower in 2070, in 2050? These are big, difficult and awkward questions for Australia to answer, but I think we need to be getting our head around the geopolitical reality of what the region that I think we will be in and our leading trading partners over the next 20, 30 years. China already is our leading export country, if you like. We draw income from China, but we want military support from the US, and we do not expect those two interests to intersect at any point in the 21st century. These are big issues for Australia. Whether in fact it happens or not remains to be seen. The question, of course, and the issue that everyone likes to talk about is the rise of China, and if you actually extend these lines, they intersect at about 2025. But is it a given that China will actually rise and intersect and be the largest country on the planet and in history by the middle of the 2020s? It's not assured, and in fact there's something that could impact it, and it's a demographic issue. This chart shows you the growth over 100 years in China of the number of people aged 15 to 64. 15 to 64-year-olds buy consumer goods, they take out loans, they reproduce, and they pay tax. This is the gut, the engine, the piston that drives the Chinese economy and labour market, if you like. And you can see it's been growing since the 1950s, up to the 1960s and so forth. And then, of course, at the end of this decade, it actually contracts, largely as a consequence of the one-child policy in the 1970s. It comes back to bite China on the backside, if you like. So it still will have a rising, a powerful labour market, but that labour market will contract. It will lose its competitive advantage, is the point. The way in which China might respond to that is actually with rural to urban migration, an acceleration of rural to urban migration. The other point is, I think, managing the issue of dissent. What is it that the Chinese middle class will want after they get a washing machine, a mobile phone, a plasma television, a motorbike and an apartment? All of those things that they aspire to from Western consumer world, if you like. The next thing that they will aspire to is something else that Westerners have, and that is the right to an opinion. And that will be difficult for the Chinese to manage in the 2020s. So there is the demographic issue that they need to navigate at the end of this decade, which could lose China its strategic advantage because the labour market isn't rising. You don't get the price tension on labour costs, if you like. And the rising market, I think, for dissent, managing internal dissent of 1.3 billion people. Everyone can be a wonderful individual in a country like Australia. There's only 23 million of us. You can be an individual in America. There's only 320 million of them. Can you be an individual with an opinion in a country of 1.3 billion? And that is the point. That is going to be the difficult issue for the Chinese to navigate in the next decade. The final slide I wanted to show you is my view of where we will generate wealth and prosperity over the next decade and our relationship with China. I want to introduce you to what I call the Dubai effect. And the Dubai effect, the reason why Dubai was a successful city-state in the 1990s is that it was a safe haven in a troubled world. Make your money in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, but park your money, your family, your lifestyle, live 6 months of the year in the safe haven of Dubai. Every wealth-generating region needs a lifestyle area nearby. During the 1990s, when the USSR was being reorganised, Russian billionaires did not live in Moscow. They live in, and they still live in, Belgravia in London. Every wealth-generating region needs a lifestyle area nearby. In the 21st century, we're seeing the emergence of a new hemisphere, China, India, and Oceania. We are feeding in food, energy, resources, commodities. Out the other side will come a demand for space, security, lifestyle. Make your money in Shanghai, Guangzhou, but park your money, your family, your lifestyle, buy an apartment, educate your kids, have a medical procedure, go to the casino, live 3 months of the year in the safe haven of Sydney, Melbourne, southeast Queensland, or Perth. It's almost like a virtual circle, if you like. We are being drawn in inextricably, if you like, in a relationship into the rise of a new superpower. And we've got the tensions of the US concern, the rising US concern about how we're going to manage that relationship. The other point I would make is the ethnic mix of the Australian population is also fundamentally shifting. In the 1950s through to the 1980s, we had a shift towards Mediterranean cultures and values, the Greeks, the Italians. When the Greeks and the Italians arrived here in the 1950s, we regarded their food as wog food. By the 1980s, we realised that actually your food is better than our food. By the 1990s, we started to embrace their lifestyle, eating out on the pavement as they do the piazza, the plaza. From the 1980s onwards, we had the Vietnamese, now the Chinese, the Indians. Over the last 5 years, the South Koreans and the Filipinos. There are 400,000 people on the Australian continent who were born in China. 400,000 people on the Australian continent who were born in India. If you add in all other Asian populations, it's around about 1.1, 1.2 million. If you add in people who has at least one parent born in an Asian country, then it's over 2 million. You've got 10% of the Australian population with effectively a blood link into Asia. And if you go to some parts of some capital cities, it's well over 50%. Go to a place called Hurstville in Sydney, the largest concentration of the Chinese population anywhere in the Australian continent, well over 50%. Harris Park is an Indian enclave in Sydney. My point is that we will see a stronger cultural shift as a rising force of Asian populations in Australia shift the palette, the thinking, the values of the Australian people in the same way that the Australian people's values, thinking, behaviour, palette was shifted by the Mediterraneans. We are seeing the emergence of a fusion culture. Anglo-Mediterranean, Asian fusion culture will define this nation by the middle of the 2020s. And we will also have a new and powerful and at times fraught relationship with what will possibly be the largest economy in history, or a contender for that position by the middle of the 2020s. Thank you very much.